Welcome to Winning Retirement TV. My name is Cynthia DeFazio, joined today by Greg and Kristin Taylor of Legacy Retirement Group. And to our viewers at home, thank you for joining us today. Of course, today's show is all about how to be winning your retirement, and we have some great tips for you ahead. But Greg, how are you today?
Oh, I'm great, and I'm looking forward to today's show.
Me too. I'm excited about it. Kristin, how are you?
I'm doing fabulous. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you. So we do have some retirement questions that we're going to get into today, but I thought it might be really fun to talk about the first ever selfie. Can you guess what year that was?
I don't know.
Okay, so the first ever selfie was taken in 1839 by Robert Cornelius, an American photographer who took a self-portrait that became known as the earliest first selfie.
So I did know that little fact, but I didn't know it was considered a selfie. So, Greg, how do your selfies work out?
Oh, my goodness. I am so uncoordinated when it comes to trying to do a selfie. And then I'm so concentrated on trying to get the button push that...
Right?
He looks mad.
Yeah. So me and selfies don't get along.
Yeah.
Well, I had
Kristin
a
does hers in the mirror a
So
lot
I
of times.
can't say, honey, send me a selfie. It'll look all jacked up, probably, if you try me. Maybe send your muscle.
I can take my shirt off.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I had a friend who recently taught me how to use the timer on the phone, which I was all excited about because I was struggling with that. I'm like, how do you move back and have this picture perfect every single time?
Yeah.
So now I've learned that. But do you guys have the selfie stick?
I don't. And, I'm funny. As much as I like photography, I don't like when it interferes with life because I think you should experience life as it happens. So there's this constant balance. I love taking pictures and getting images of the kids, but I also want to be in the moment and absorb it and feel it and not be stuck behind the lens trying to get the perfect shot.
And you're an excellent photographer, by the way.
Thank you.
I mean, you have a gift.
Thank
you. Truly do. Well, we have some retirement questions to get through. Would you like me to start with the first one?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
This is a TV viewer who reached out, and it's 1 year away from retirement and wants to sit down with an advisor to start preparing. He mentioned that he has about $600,000 set aside, but he doesn't remember which companies his 401k and annuity are with. So he plans to gather and bring his statements to the office. Is it common for someone not to know exactly where they have their accounts? Like, are they scattered typically?
Yeah, I mean, well, in a lot of cases, it's actually more common than you think because think about it. Throughout your working life, you maybe work 30 years, maybe even 40 years. And you've got jobs from your 20s, maybe even, in high school, you've got jobs in your 30s. Maybe you stayed home for a little bit with the children, like a lot of women do, and then you went back to work. And so you have these piles of money set aside everywhere. Mm-hmm. And maybe you transferred one out, a 401k out into a IRA and had it at an old bank and switched banks. And so now you have this old IRA over here you didn't think about. And especially now, it's hard to keep track of everything because so many places have gone paperless. And so those emails come in, maybe they go in your junk box. And so we hear this a lot. We hear people say, I just want to make it more simplified. I've got stuff everywhere.
Absolutely.
Even to the point where clients will bring in boxes full of statements and papers from, the last statement maybe 10 years ago, and they say, well, I don't even know if this account's even active anymore. I just brought everything I had.
Yeah.
And that's okay too, yeah.
What's that company that you've been talking about where you go to find lost money?
Oh, it's kind of like that, yeah. I think there's an unclaimed funds site or something like that,
Yes. Well, we don't, hopefully no one's lost track of their 401k. Their IRA.
To that extent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it is, recently we had someone come in and they had a shoebox full of all their statements and stuff, and it was kind of just stuffed in there, and they kind of apologized and said, no, that's part of the process is to kind of get everything organized.
Okay.
And it's not as hard to go about saving money. It's easy to, I've got a 401k, I've got an IRA, I'm going to have money deducted from my pay every single paycheck, put it into that 401k, hopefully a Roth 401k, but put it into that account. But what's difficult is understanding how to apply it to your retirement. Because you have to make sense of it. Okay, how's that going to work for my long-term growth, and how much income can I take out, and what kind of taxes am I going to owe, and what about those required minimum distributions? How much might they be, and how much tax will I have to pay on all that? And then what if I have a healthcare problem, and how am I going to pay for that? And all these things are on our minds, and we know that we know how to save, but how do we do the rest? Well, to get organized, you have to answer some questions. First of all, when do I want to retire?
So you skipped a step.
What skip did I step?
What step?
I think the first step is actually sitting down and getting all the different accounts organized, like go in QuickBooks, you know, that's pretty easy to set up an account. Even you could do it if you tried, or maybe a spreadsheet, or maybe a binder system. We've helped clients do that. I think getting the items organized first to figure out the lay of the land, what you have, is the first step.
Well, that's why we send out, before people come in, we send out that My Retirement Kit.
Right, that helps
to help them get their thoughts organized before they come in. Even if and by the way, even if people aren't totally organized when they come in, that's okay. We can help with that.
Right.
You know, that part's the easy part, is helping, you know, you just list it all out, and then you find, okay, how much do I have in my tax deferred accounts? How much do I have in my taxable accounts? How much do I have in my tax-free accounts? How much of my money is at risk? How much of my money is protected? These are all things we can take account of. Then we can decide, okay, what needs to change? But we do kind of need to know when we're going to retire.
Right.
Because that's when their paychecks stop.
Absolutely.
And, you know, ideally, when the paycheck stops, new ones begin.
Right.
Right? So how much will that cost? That's a conversation that people really need to have with themselves prior to coming in, if they can. Now, I'm happy to have those discussions, and I do, but it's important to understand, okay, what is it that I really want to do when I retire, and how much is that going to cost?
Yes.
You know, what does it cost to live my lifestyle? Because there's basic expenses like, you know, utilities and cell phone bill and, you know, our property taxes and things like that. And those kinds of things are what I would call expenses. But then there's our discretionary spending. That's when we want to go out to eat with friends, with our family. That's when we, you know, have those random things that we want to do around the house. I mean, recently, Kristin and I were, you know, we were on this kick to, you know, do some stuff outside. And so we were working on that. And so you have all these things that...
Well, and you're bringing that up because it costs a lot more than we expected. We just wanted to get some flowers, but it turned into this, well, we got all these flowers, and then it was like we didn't get anything because it was so spread out, so we had to make another trip.
Yeah, I filled up my truck twice, plus half again. Yes.
I know what you mean.
He's like, I didn't expect to spend this much money on flowers this weekend. I'm like, I know, it added up quick.
That is so funny because Tony will look at the receipt when we're done, and he's like, this is what we have for this amount. I mean, it is astronomical.
It's like going to the grocery store, you know.
Yes.
I think they put each item in one different bag just to make it look like you bought a lot more for what you spent.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
Then how much have you saved?
Okay.
That's a big one. And then on that, how do we put it all together?
Right.
How do we make that a plan to where we can say, okay, I know I can live my life. I know I can do all the things I want to do. I can live my lifestyle. I can be present where I want to be in retirement with what I've saved. I'm putting it all together now. I've got a plan for emergencies. I've got a plan for income, and I have a plan for long-term growth. When you have that, that's when you can feel security in retirement.
Absolutely. It's how you can win your retirement, correct? Greg, thank you so much. Kristin, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, there's a number for you to call on your screen. That number is 614-336-7660, 614-336-7660. If you're in the viewing audience today and you're asking yourself, do I have a plan for my retirement? Do I know where my different sources of income will come from? If you're unsure, call in today and schedule a complimentary consultation with Greg and Kristin. The number is 614-336-7660. There's also a really amazing website that you can visit. Go to yourlegacyquiz.com. Once again, it's yourlegacyquiz.com. You'll put in some information about yourself, and you'll find out if you're on the right track for retirement. And if you need to make some adjustments, wouldn't today be the perfect day? Once again, 614-336-7660. We'll be right back after this very short commercial break.
Have you visited LegacyRetirementGroup.com lately? Not only can you easily schedule an appointment by clicking on Schedule Now, you can visit the Tools section and request a free copy of Legacy's My Retirement Kit. Simply fill in your email address and a few other details. Then check your email and you'll find a 10-page retirement kit in your inbox that can help you become better organized. Legacy's My Retirement Kit is designed to help you take a personal inventory and assign realistic values to your assets for what lies ahead. It's a key first step towards creating a true financial plan for your future. And you can do it for free at home right now. To be clear, this does not take the place of a retirement plan or estate plan, but it will help you get organized for the future of your retirement. Visit LegacyRetirementGroup.com and click on Tools to request your My Retirement Kit today. That's LegacyRetirementGroup.com.
Welcome back to Winning Retirement Television. My name is Cynthia DeFazio, joined today by Greg and Kristin Taylor of Legacy Retirement Group. We're talking all about how to plan your perfect retirement. And today's show, we have some retirement questions. So I have another one. Stay with us. So this is interesting. This is a couple who called in after seeing the show. They're over 65, they're retired, and they have accumulated just under $1 million for their future. So just under $1 million. A friend told them to let their kids pay the taxes on their IRAs, but they wanted to see what the legacy advisors thought of that plan. What do you both think of that plan?
Well, most important is that we're okay. We don't want to put ourselves in peril. We'll talk about that, but you have to think about long term with taxes. Because unintentionally, if you have $1 million when you pass away, Uncle Sam could get a third of it in taxes. So if you have 3 children that you're leaving your money to, then a third can go to Uncle Sam. So therefore, the other 3 divide the other 2/3 of it. So guess who by default became the greatest beneficiary of what you left behind?
IRS.
Uncle Sam.
Yes.
Yes.
That's terrible.
I'm a patriot. I love America. I love all that it stands for, or
Yes.
at least what I believe America stands for.
God bless the USA.
And yes, but I don't necessarily want to leave any more to Uncle Sam. I don't want to make them the biggest beneficiary of my retirement accounts.
Right.
So, but I think it is important that we set our priorities, though. And what I mean by that is we need to have enough money to support and maintain the way we want to live in retirement. And I just had this discussion with a couple that was in the office. They came in and they hear me rant and rave on radio all the time about Roth conversions. And I talk about it a lot, and I'm passionate about it. But I said, okay, this particular couple had saved about $850,000, and they needed $40,000 a year to maintain their lifestyle. So we did the income plan. It took about $500,000 to do that. That left us $350,000 for growth. I said, so if we do Roth conversions with that $350,000, even if we're able to do it and stay within the 24% tax bracket, that means you've got about, $80,000 less because we paid the tax to convert this. And I said, we can do that, but I'm a little concerned to give up that $80,000 for a conversion
Right.
when you may need this during your retirement years.
Absolutely.
So in their case, I felt like there weren't quite enough assets to make a Roth conversion strategy make a lot of sense. And if you're not going to go all in, then, if you just do a little bit here, a little bit there, it's really not going to make a difference.
Yes.
So for them, I said, no, I don't recommend a Roth conversion strategy, but for those who have excess retirement assets. If you've got a couple $1 million extra, you got $1 million extra, you want to take some time, you want to really create a strategy. We actually have wonderful software that can help us determine the ideal time frame to do Roth conversions.
Well, and I
Okay.
think this is where it goes back to understanding what the families we meet with really want, what the goal for their money is, because in some cases that they're not worried about their detriment as much as they're worried about leaving a legacy. And then you can come up with some kind of plan that appeases that want or that goal, right?
Yes.
That they're trying to accomplish. And so we really want to look at those things as we move forward through the planning process, not
Yes.
just throw everything together or do something because it's the fad thing on TV right now, but really make sure that it makes sense for their situation.
Okay.
Yes, and when I talk about Roth conversions, I don't want to just really assume that people understand all the caveats to it. So when you do a conversion from a traditional IRA or 401k or tax deferred account to a Roth IRA, what happens is that transitions over, you owe tax on this.
Okay.
Now, each conversion comes with a 5-year waiting period, meaning that you can't touch those assets for 5 years. So that's the other part about liquidity needs. We want to make sure that, okay, what if I needed that money in the next 5 years?
Sure.
So there needs to be the affordability of liquidity, affordability on the taxes, affordability to make sure that that Roth conversion process makes sense. But when it does, it's a beautiful thing because now we're really accumulating money tax-free.
Which is amazing.
It is. So, and it's not even just about the kids.
Yeah.
It's about later in life when you need money, you want to buy a car, you want to do some big purchase items, you can now pull money out of a tax-free account. Uncle Sam, your debt to Uncle Sam and to society is paid. So now all that money is yours. It's accumulating for you. Not, no one else has their fingers in that money.
Exactly.
So that's a big, big deal.
It really is. And you mentioned a website tool that you have created is it testmyretirement.com? Is that what you were speaking of, Greg?
Yes. Well, that tool helps people understand what their obligation might be. We have other tools to show them the best way to go about doing it.
Okay.
The first thing is find out what the need is, right?
Right. I think the biggest thing to think about is understanding if you're maybe already retired and you're sitting there thinking, okay, I've got to start all over, throw the baby out with the bathwater. No, you don't need to do that. A lot of times you don't need to do a complete overhaul. Now, if you don't have a plan at all, it's starting from scratch. That's easy. I feel like that's easy.
Right.
If you already have a plan and you don't feel like it's working for you, or you're thinking, man, I don't think taxes or tax strategies or tax efficiency was anything to do with what I planned originally, well, then now it's time to maybe start making some tweaks and look at it. Maybe an overhaul isn't necessary. You just need to look at what makes sense for your situation.
Absolutely, because if you have enough liquidity for your needs, wants, and emergencies, you have enough income to maintain your lifestyle, and you have enough growth for the long term for taxes, inflation, and healthcare, and all those things. Once you've taken care of all those things and you have excess, now we can start focusing on a tax-efficient future. And that's what makes it wonderful. And to find out where people stand, they can go to testmyretirement.com. They can plug in some information. They can get a report in just a few moments and figure out, okay, does it make sense to make that call? Does it make sense to schedule that meeting and start now becoming more efficient?
Yes. And what my mind went to when I heard this question is that maybe she was thinking of something that actually, when they released, and I should say removed the stretch IRA, it's a lot more cumbersome now for a family member to pay taxes. It would have been easier before this rule was put in place, correct?
Well, now they have to get the money out. They could have to get the money out within 10 years. And here's the other thing. If the person that passes away was already taking their RMDs, now they just have to continue the RMDs right away. So there are parts of that was a great point to bring up that are overlooked.
Yes.
And taxes overall are overlooked. So the website testmyretirement.com is a good starting resource to go to.
And the government keeps changing the rules, so you need to
Yes.
make sure you keep up.
Yeah.
Yes, because they make the rules.
They do.
Kristin, thank you so
Yes.
much. Greg, thank you so much. It's time for you to test your retirement. Visit testmyretirement.com. If you're in the viewing audience today and you're asking yourself, do I have a tax strategy for my retirement years? If you're unsure, this is the perfect opportunity to testmyretirement.com. Once again, testmyretirement.com. To call in and to schedule your complimentary consultation, call in to 614-336-7660. The number is 614-336-7660. The Taylors are passionate about you winning your retirement. Don't leave it to chance. Make a plan today. We're going to be right back after this very short commercial break with more retirement questions.
Have you been wondering if a Roth conversion is a good idea? Do you feel a lack of confidence in Washington when it comes to future taxes during your retirement years? You should probably visit testmyretirement.com. It's Legacy Retirement Group's latest no-cost resource for soon-to-be and current retirees. TestMyRetirement.com is super simple to navigate. After clicking on Learn More, you'll fill in a few pieces of information, and within 30 seconds, you'll see a personalized analysis of your total potential taxes in retirement using your existing approach, compared to what's possible with some adjustments. Every situation is different, but if you don't want to be in debt to Uncle Sam, go to testmyretirement.com to find out if you can possibly reduce your future retirement obligations. Get started now at testmyretirement.com.
Welcome back to Winning Retirement TV. My name is Cynthia DeFazio, joined today by Greg and Kristin Taylor of Legacy Retirement Group, and we are tackling some retirement questions on today's show. So without further ado, let's get to the next one. This is a couple who owns a business, happened to hear your radio show, which they love. They said they're huge fans, Winning Retirement Radio on 610 WTVN, and decided to get in touch with the team. They're considering stepping back from the business and handing it over to their kids. They do have some savings set aside, but is it more difficult to retire when passing down a business rather than selling it? That is their question.
Well, I'd say, yeah, on the surface, that is. I think I know which caller you're talking about in this case, but think about it this way. If you are retiring with a business, right, that's a lot different than retiring from a business. Because with a business, a lot of your retirement is really tied up in the business. So from a financial standpoint, because you've poured and invested your money over the years into that business, and if you've thought about it throughout the years and making it a sellable asset at the end, and now you're thinking about giving it to someone, you're losing out on that asset, right?
Makes
Which is a
sense.
very large part of what your retirement nest egg is built on. Being in business owners, we understand this.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
When your blood, sweat, and tears goes into that thing for the
Yes.
first 10 to 15 years and you're barely making any money and you're just believing in this idea you have, there's a lot tied up in it financially, but also emotionally.
Absolutely.
And we've seen that in the
Right.
past with other clients who've given or sold their business
Yes.
to their
it's
children.
your baby.
It is.
You've
It is.
created
And
this.
nobody thinks their baby's ugly.
Well, that is true.
And good point. It can go both ways. That's
Yes.
such a good point that you're
Yes.
bringing up, because it could
Yeah.
go from the aspect of the children might make it turn into something that's even greater than it already is.
It's true.
But are you going to be okay emotionally with that? Are you
Good
going to be able to
point.
part ways with that? And also, it could go the opposite way. You've made this into a wonderful business. You hear this a lot in the restaurant industry. Wonderful business, it's done great for 20, 30 years, and then the kids take over and it goes downhill, right?
Yes, you've
Heard that many
yes.
times. So understanding that you need to start thinking psychologically about it first, and then financially about it as well, I think are two areas to start with.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think a good place to start with this as a business owner, a small business, is hiring the right accountant.
Perfect.
Because there
Yes.
are great accountants that focus on small business. We work with one that does a fantastic job for our firm.
Okay.
And helping you understand how to manage your taxes as a business,
Okay.
but also helping you manage the worth and value of your company.
Practice management.
It's practice management. It's more than just, counting the beans, so to speak.
Yes.
And getting a lot of advice, setting things up properly, not just for when you're running your business, but for when you want to transition. This is, I would say 3 to 5 years out from when someone wants to transition, they really need to hone in on this.
Okay.
Well, and it brings about new challenges too from an income standpoint, because now
It does.
It depends on the type of business it is, but
True.
let's say it's a business with a fairly persistent track record of revenues, and you're able to draw an income and maybe take owner draws at the end of the year for bonusing, getting extra money for projects you want to do personally. And so now you're thinking about giving that asset away. Well, where's your income coming from at that point?
Great question.
Who's going to pay you those
Yep.
retirement payments? So then that starts to bring about the question of, do you just sell it to them or give it to them with no residual? Or do you stay involved so that you can continue taking a pay and that gives them time to pay for the business? That's another question you can ask.
Right. They need skin in the game.
They do, but the only caveat to that I'll say is we've seen this with a couple clients is that there's risk involved with that. So if you don't cut ties completely, you don't sell it or give it away based on, your financial situation, and you're continuing to draw income from that business as a part of your retirement, what if something goes wrong?
Exactly.
We're women. We think of like the worst case scenario.
And then work our way back.
5 different ways. They don't even know what's happening in our mind.
No.
And they're like, what's happening? Why are you stressed out, right?
Yes.
It's because we're thinking of those things.
100%.
And you really have to include that as a part of the conversation with an advisor while you're just discovering whether or not to sell your business.
You really do. And then I'm also wondering, have you ever had clients that have come in that have made this decision to either step away from it or to sell their business, only to realize a little bit later that they're bored and they actually open up a new business that's similar to the one that they sold?
Yeah, that's the psychological thing I was referring to, is that a lot of times so much of who we are and our purpose is tied up into what we do for a living.
100%.
And it's even more so for you watching right now. If you own a business, you know what I'm saying. You know that you took this thing from 0 to 100, right? If you're 60 years old and you started a business in your 30s and you feel like, I did this and this was the thing that, it's my
baby.
piece de resistance of my life, right? And now you have to get rid of it. It's hard. So,
totally.
Reinventing yourself is seen a lot with the business owners.
Okay, I thought so.
Yes, and whether people are transitioning it to family or whether they're selling their business, we just got a brand new family that came in and they just sold their business. Mm-hmm. They had it sold. They actually, when they first came in, they had, the ink hadn't even dried yet.
Okay.
And they finally got their final payment and they're saying, okay, Greg, here's the deal. Here's how much we were getting from our business. We need to be able to replace that. Well, the good news was they had some assets. Mm-hmm. And so I sat down with them. We figured it out. They had enough resources. So we had to replace $160,000 a year of income. That's a big deal.
That's a lot.
That's a big deal.
Absolutely.
And so we set aside enough assets for that income. They're getting those paychecks every single month. They've already begun. So they're getting their paychecks. They're starting their income. They're on that journey. Now they've got the growth. They've got everything set aside. They went from business owners to now having fun in retirement.
Because they had a plan and they are winning their retirement.
Yes.
Greg, thank you so much. Kristin, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, most specifically, thank you for spending time with us today on Winning Retirement TV. If you're curious to know where you stand, don't forget to go to testmyretirement.com. That's testmyretirement.com, or you can call 614-336-7660. Be safe, be happy, be blessed, and don't forget, be winning your retirement. Stay tuned.